Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine two really different kinds of silences in music history.
Right.
First, you've got this symphony, powerful music, just cut short, left unfinished by a young composer right at a pivotal moment.
And then there's the other story, which is almost, unbelievable, a really famous composer whose actual body wasn't complete after he died.
It's quite something.
What's so fascinating, I think, is how these two tales, Franz Schubert's unfinished symphony and the totally bizarre case of Joseph Haydn's Missing Skull, they seem worlds apart.
Yeah.
But they actually tell us so much about the 19th century, about how music was made, how people thought about genius, and even these sort of obsessive ways composers were remembered.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we've been looking at some really compelling accounts, digging into the lives of these composers, but focusing specifically on these incomplete stories. And our goal today is to get beyond just the weirdness of it all, to really understand what these incidents reveal about music history, the people involved, the context. It's more than notes. It's the human side.
It really makes you ask, doesn't it? What does complete even mean when we talk about art or someone's legacy? Is it just the finished piece?
Good question.
Or do all these surrounding things, an unfinished work, or, what happened to Haydn's head, become part of the actual story?
Okay, let's go back. Picture Vienna, late 1822. It's autumn, probably damp, a bit bleak maybe.
Right.
And young Franz Schubert, he's only 25, is going through a really rough patch.
Yeah, the sources paint a difficult picture. A teaching job hadn't worked out.
He'd had some trouble with the authorities, maybe after a night out.
And then the really bad news, he was diagnosed with syphilis. People who knew him said his moods were all over the place. Intense creativity 1 minute, then withdrawal.
But here's the thing. Amidst all this personal turmoil, he's incredibly productive.
It's quite astonishing, isn't it? During this exam period, he's writing these amazing song cycles like Die Schöne Müllerin, Verdinterreise 2, sketching a big piano sonata, and crucially for us, starting the symphony in B minor, the unfinished.
It shows something about creativity, maybe how it pushes through adversity.
Or maybe it's just a mystery how that works.
So how did this symphony even start? It seems pretty standard at first.
Yeah, a couple of his fraternity buddies, Hüttenbrenner and Spahn, got him an honorary diploma from the Styrian Musical Society in Graz.
Okay, a nice gesture.
Came with a fancy baton, apparently, and the promise of a performance if he dedicated a new symphony to them.
Right.
Schubert mentions it pretty casually in a letter, it seems, and then just starts writing.
So a seemingly normal commission.
Exactly. But what came out of it was anything but normal. By late October, the accounts suggest the first two movements were fully orchestrated.
And these were the famous ones.
That's right. The Allegro Moderato, that cello theme that sort of rises up, deeply expressive. And the Andante con moto with those beautiful clarinet lines. Someone described it like a delicate conversation, really intimate.
Beautiful. And then it just stops.
Abruptly. He sketches 65 bars of the next movement, the scherzo. It sounds bold, brassy, almost happy, actually.
So he started the third movement.
Yes, and the middle section, the trio, is actually fully written out in short score like a detailed sketch.
Okay.
But then, mid-phrase, the orchestration just ends, vanishes, like the pen literally frozen the page.
Wow. And that's the big mystery, right?
Precisely. Why did he stop? There's no finale, and crucially, no explanation from Schubert himself. Nothing.
And what did he do next? Did he struggle with it?
Apparently not. The records show he just pivoted immediately. Started working on an opera, fierabras, writing piano pieces, those impromptus.
So he just moved on.
It seems like it. As if this incredible symphony fragment was just left behind. Which maybe tells us something about how he worked. Always on to the next idea.
Which then leads to the next almost unbelievable part. He bundles up these pages, the two finished movements and the sketch.
Right.
Seals them, sends them off to Hüttenbrenner, one of the guys who got him the diploma.
For the society, as promised.
Yeah, with a note like, here you go. And Hüttenbrenner
Puts it in a drawer.
just puts it in a drawer. For how long?
43 years.
43 years. It just sat there.
Locked away. Apparently the key got lost at some point. It's incredible. While music history marches on, this masterpiece is just dormant.
That just makes the mystery deeper. So what are the theories? Why unfinished?
Well, scholars have chewed this over for ages. His health obviously was failing. That's one possibility.
Makes sense.
Others think maybe he felt intimidated. Beethoven's ninth had just landed. Maybe perfectionism kicked in.
The shadow of Beethoven.
Exactly. There's also the idea that, well, maybe a two-movement symphony wasn't that weird back then. Some mention Mozart's later piano concerto sometimes having fewer than the standard four movements.
But didn't you say he started the third movement, the scherzo?
That's the sticking point. That partial scherzo really complicates the planned two-movement theory. It strongly suggests he intended more.
And knowing Schubert, wasn't he always revising, starting things, moving on?
Very much so.
Yeah.
He was incredibly prolific. 7 finished symphonies, all that chamber music, over 600 songs, and he died so young.
31.
Yeah. So maybe leaving things incomplete was just part of his process. He had so many ideas pouring out.
Still 43 years in a drawer.
It's extraordinary. It wasn't until 1865 that a conductor, Johann Herbeck, finally tracked down the now elderly Hüttenbrenner.
And convinced him to look through his old stuff.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Persuaded him to dig it out. Herbeck's students quickly copied the parts, and that December, finally, the first two movements got their premiere in Vienna.
Imagine hearing that for the first time. What was the reaction?
Powerful. People were apparently stunned, mesmerized. One critic wrote about the strings sounding like breaths of cold air, the brass like existential protest.
Wow! Using language like from Gothic novels?
Exactly. Not your typical concert review. It spread like wildfire, Europe, America. And the missing ending became, well, part of its allure.
The incompleteness was the hook.
Absolutely. It invited listeners to imagine their own ending, to fill in the silence. That became its unique power.
Have people tried to finish it?
Oh, yes. Several composers. Felix Weingartner famously tried to link the scherzo sketch to music from Schubert's Rosamunde. Others composed entirely new finales or used other Schubert pieces.
But we usually just hear the two movements.
Almost always. It seems that's how it works best. The power lies in what isn't there.
It's like that quote, a door ajar, a diary entry cut short.
That captures it perfectly. A glimpse into a moment, frozen. Its incompleteness is its strength.
Okay, now let's shift gears dramatically.
Right.
Fast forward 12 years, May 31st, 1809. We're still in Vienna, but in the Gumpendorf suburb.
And this time it's the end of a long and celebrated life. Joseph Haydn, the father of the symphony, is 77.
And it's a tense time, right? Napoleon's army is bombarding the city.
A very dramatic setting for his final hours. Yet apparently, Haydn was quite calm.
What did he do?
He asked for the score of his own work, The Seven Last Words of Christ, to be put on his piano, played a chord, and then passed away peacefully.
A quiet end amidst the chaos.
Because of the war, the funeral was simple. He was buried in the Hunstrom Cemetery. Seems like a straightforward end.
But it wasn't, not even close.
Not at all. This is where the story takes a seriously strange turn. Just 3 days later, two men show up at the cemetery.
Johann Peters and Joseph Karl Rosenbaum.
And they weren't just random ghouls. They were followers of this theory called phrenology.
Ah, the skull-shaped thing. Believing bumps on your head showed your genius, or lack thereof. Now discredited, of course.
Completely. But back then, it had a certain scientific allure. This idea you could measure genius was very 19th century.
Okay, so these phrenology guys show up with shovels. What happens? This is where it gets really unsettling.
It does. They bribed the gravedigger, dug up Haydn's body by moonlight, and then, apparently quite skillfully, they removed his head.
Oh my God.
And replaced it with a skull taken from a pauper's grave. They even used quicklime, trying to speed up decomposition and hide the switch.
Why? Why would they do that? Just to study the skull?
That seems to be the main driver. This obsessive belief that Haydn's skull held the secrets to his musical genius. They wanted to examine it, measure it according to phrenological principles.
So for 11 years.
For 11 years, Haydn's body lay in the grave, but with the wrong head. The substitute skull just sitting there. It's incredibly macabre.
Until 1820. What happened then?
Prince Nicholas Esterhazy II, Haydn's old patron's grandson, decided Haydn deserved better. He ordered the remains moved to a proper mausoleum in Eisenstadt, where Haydn had worked for so long.
Okay, a state occasion.
Right. Procession arrives, coffin is opened for a final blessing, and shock. The skull's obviously not Haydn's.
They can only imagine the scene. So they investigated.
They did. And suspicion quickly fell on Rosenbaum. By then he was retired, living with his wife Therese, who, ironically, used to sing in Haydn's operas.
The nerve. Did he confess?
Eventually, after some tense negotiations, he finally produced a skull, bleached white, drilled with little holes for measurements.
Was it Haydn's?
Experts looked at the teeth, the wearer, and said, probably. But the prince wasn't totally convinced, wanted sworn proof. And then Rosenbaum claimed he'd somehow misplaced it again.
Misplaced it. Haydn's head.
It's absurd, isn't it? It shows this weird mix of scientific obsession, maybe guilt and just sheer audacity.
So Haydn was reburied in Eisenstadt, still headless.
Yes, without his original skull. And then followed decades, literally decades of attempts to get it back.
A diplomatic tussle over a skull.
Pretty much. Rosenbaum died, the skull went to his doctor, who then donated it to the Gesellschaft der Musikfreunde in Vienna, the Society of Friends of Music.
And they put it on display.
In a glass case. Labeled Caput Magni Musicorum Haydn, head of the great musician Haydn. Tourists flocked to see it, phrenologists kept studying it.
While the Esterhazy family were furious, presumably.
Understandably so. This went on through 2 world wars, political changes.
Until when? How did it end?
Finally, in 1954, a resolution. The Musikfreunde agreed to return the skull to Eisenstadt.
So Haydn was finally reunited with his head.
Yes, but here's the final bizarre twist. Out of some sort of respect for the unknown person whose skull had been the substitute for over a century.
They upped that one too.
They interred it in the mausoleum as well. So the accounts say Haydn's skeleton now rests there with 2 skulls, his own and the pauper's.
That is just unbelievable, a truly peculiar end.
So what does this whole gruesome story tell us? The sources suggest it really highlights that 19th century need to try and quantify genius to find a physical cause for it.
Contrasting with the more romantic idea of divine inspiration.
Exactly. There was this scientific urge, even if misguided, like phrenology. And the irony, of course, is Haydn, composer, such balance and order becoming this macabre trophy.
It's a stark contrast.
And pulling it back to Schubert, you have these 2 kinds of incompleteness. Schubert's artistic puzzle, Haydn's literal dismemberment.
But both stories really underline something important, don't they? How fragile musical heritage can be.
Absolutely. Think of all the music that's just gone. Manuscripts lost to fire, used as wrapping paper seriously.
Didn't Haydn himself lose some opera scores in London? Just misplace them.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
And Bach's kids supposedly used some of his cantata manuscripts to line pie tins or wrap fish.
Oh, the horror.
And then there are mysteries like Schubert's other symphony, the Gastein. Mentioned in letters, maybe performed, but vanished.
Could it still be out there, misfiled?
Some scholars think it might have morphed into his great C major symphony. Others hold out hope it's just lost in an archive somewhere. We just don't know.
And war. That must have destroyed so much.
Tragically, yes. The sources mention Telemann cantatas lost in the bombing of Dresden way back in 1760. And huge amounts of orchestral music destroyed in Berlin and Dresden during World War II.
It's sobering. For every lost work that luckily resurfaces, like some Vivaldi or Mendelssohn pieces.
How many others are just silenced forever?
But there's some hope now. With technology.
There is, thankfully. Our sources talk about things like multispectral imaging, seeing faded ink, AI helping piece together torn pages.
Wow.
Even deep ultraviolet scans uncovering a Handel aria hidden under scorch marks on parchment. And machine learning models that might be able to reconstruct fragmented works. It's pretty exciting, like musical archaeology.
That's amazing, but technology isn't everything, right?
No, the sources emphasize that it often still comes down to human curiosity. Chance? Someone finding an old letter, questioning a label, deciding not to throw out some old papers.
Just a moment of hesitation.
Exactly. Music itself might feel ephemeral, but depends on these physical things, scores, manuscripts. When they're lost, the silence is permanent.
So maybe next time you hear the unfinished, think about Schubert pausing, putting down his pen. That decision.
Or Haydn working away, completely unaware of the bizarre journey his own skull would take. These huge legacies often hinge on such small, almost mundane moments.
It definitely makes you think, doesn't it? What other treasures might be hanging by a thread, waiting for a chance discovery, or just fading away, something for you, the listener, to consider, perhaps.
Crucial point.
If these stories, this exploration resonated with you, we hope you'll keep digging into these fascinating histories. Maybe subscribe, share your thoughts. It really helps others find these kinds of deep dives.
Absolutely.
And perhaps just appreciate the fragility of it all. Listen closely, not just to the notes, but maybe also to the silences, and consider what might be missing.